six, I should say. And also, I want to give you a little history lesson. I think it was by Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was former President Barack Hussein Obama's mentor, and who was also former President Jimmy Carter's national security advisor. Mr. Brzezinski wrote in a book of his and in some of his writings to different organizations, said that if they could separate Russia and Ukraine, then they can prevent the reemergence of Russia as a rival to the U.S. empire or a rival to the Western world. These are words by Mr. Zbigniew Brzezinski. And he was in the circles of power. And these writings are passed on to all of these think tanks, and all of these think tanks put their input into government, into the national security arrangement that goes across the whole spectrum of government. And we can truly see the implementation of these writings here. Because why would America be thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away from her own shores and saying that this is a national security threat to the United States? And I want to bring something to your mind. Whenever someone else is getting ready to stand up and to defend their sovereignty or to respond to aggressive acts, America and the Western world always says that we need you to restrain from violence. We need to talk about this. We need to communicate more. Why is it that is the case when it's referring to Russia, China, Iran, Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, or what have you, Venezuela? But America can go around the world and bomb countries under all kind of false pretenses, and then it gets swept under the rug. And even after the facts are presented to the world, everybody, including the media, glosses over it, as though 500,000 to 1 million lives lost in Iraq is nothing. Or Ms. Madeleine Albright said she think it was worth it. This is crazy. This is absolute insane to think that you have the right. And I'm going to take my hat off for a second because I want to talk to y'all. It's absolutely insane to think that you have the right, that you are such an exceptional nation, that you have the right to involve yourself in the politics of other nations, to try to destabilize other nations, excuse me, to think that you have the God-given right to decide what's right and what's wrong for every other nation on earth. And everyone should refrain from acts of violence but you, the number one purveyor of violence on the planet. And everybody, and I present facts, and I know people get mad, and I have to wipe my face because I'm under the bright lights, brothers and sisters, and all of the listeners and viewers, I'm under the bright lights. And these lights are intense in front of me, and they're actually really hurting my eyes because, as I told you, I've had between 3 and 5 hours of sleep in the last 4 to 5 days. But I want you to think about something. The number one purveyor of violence globally, and we can look at it domestically through her police forces and her government institutions on the poor and the downtrodden in her own society. We can also look at it when she deals with other nations. She is right now, listen to me good, she is right now involved in the politics or in the affairs of no less than 135 nations around the globe. No less. She has some military or political standing in these nations, and these nations are telling her, we don't want you anymore. We can do our own thing. But yet she won't leave. She hasn't left. Think about because see, when I tell you to think about this, these are facts that I want to bring home to you. How many years has it been since the Korean War? And yet America still has dozens of bases in a country, South Korea, an artificial country, because South and North Korea are supposed to be one country altogether, but it was split up by Western imperialists who were trying to surround China and surround Russia, and also to siphon off the untapped resources on the Korean Peninsula. But let's just say South Korea. She has dozens of bases. I believe there was a writing a year or so ago. She had at least 24 bases in South Korea. I want you to understand the significance of that. Okay, South Korea is roughly the size of Alabama, the state of Alabama. Roughly the size of the state of Alabama. And America has dozens of bases in a country that is up, what, 50, 60 years from the Korean War. Still, look at Japan since World War II. America still has dozens upon dozens of bases. And I was looking at an interview one time by a former Japanese prime minister. And I'm going to share this with you. And it's hard to find, but maybe you can Google this. And he was being questioned by some Western journalists. And in his interview that he gave, they asked him about the question with China and Japan. And he was saying that it was America that ties the hand of the Japanese prime ministers. And he talked about how it was America that kept instigating the tensions between Japan and China, and how it could be a cordial and brotherly union if America were to step out of the middle of it. But he said something that really caught my eye. And excuse me, this is lavender lemonade. But he said something that caught my eye. He said they wanted all American bases out, but America strong, and I'm paraphrasing, America strong-armed him and strong-armed the Japanese prime ministers to prevent them from forcing America to leave. And the Americans said that if Japan moved forward with relocating those military bases off of Japanese territory, that America would then seize the entire island of Okinawa and the surrounding areas. The American military would seize all of those surrounding islands. Now, you don't see that in the press. You don't see that in the news. And he said, this is what happens Japan from having a truly independent foreign policy. Now, how is that democracy?